But let's go ahead and get started. It's 6:12. So welcome to the September member meeting of Women in the Visual and Literary Arts. I am Melody Locke, the current president, and we like to start our meetings by reading the mission statement. And I'm just like, Gail, you're in the meeting and you're texting me? I feel like maybe I forgot something and now it's like I'm being told to do something. Anyway, we want to start by reading the mission statement. WiVLA's mission is to provide an inspiring forum for women to explore and advance their creative development, to promote their work in the marketplace, and to infuse the community with their spirit of cooperation and invention. Okay, so before we get started with our meeting this evening, we have a couple of announcements. Ellen, there you are.
Yes.
She's not our official literary co-chair, but she will be giving the literary announcements this evening.
You want me to do that right now?
Right now.
Okay, because in November, it's very exciting. You have two opportunities in which to write, and they're very different topics. So, pick one or pick both. I don't care. For the first one, I have to introduce my little friend here, and it's Haunted Holidays at Brazos Bookstore on November 5th. Houston Writers Guild and WiVLA are joining together to do a reading. So you have 5 minutes to give us a short, scary story about any holiday that runs from Halloween to New Year's Eve. So we might have skeletons, with pumpkins on their head, or we might have skeletons with diapers for the new year. There's no telling what we're going to have, but please think about 5 minutes, scary story, give me a witch and a skeleton and we can go lots of places. All right, so that's November 5th, and it'll be in person. It will not be Zoom, it will be in person at Brazos Bookstore. And you will be getting more information on that so you can sign up. And I'm really looking forward to seeing who all signs up for that. I already know one or two of you who are going to sign up for that. And yes, I have signed up for that. The second event we're going to have is our typical November member meeting, where we usually have that as a literary writing meeting. And the theme this year is what if? That's it. What if? Again, write 5 minutes, a poem or a story, and the same thing for Haunted Holidays. You can write poetry too. Scary poetry is a lot of fun. But for the meeting, the literary meeting in November, I did the typical November meeting date. We will have the theme, what if, and write 5 minutes on that. And 5 minutes should include a very brief intro, but we really want to hear about your writing. So those are two opportunities in November to write. So pick up your pens and pencils and please get started. Thank you.
Ellen, I'm new, so I don't know when those literary writing meetings are. What's the date and the time?
Who's asking?
Lisa.
Oh, hi, Lisa. I couldn't see. The Haunted Holidays is not the same date every year. Last year we did Spooky Christmas. This year we're doing Haunted Holidays. So we can include more holidays. And that will be Saturday, November 5th at Brazos Bookstore. And I want to say 6 o'clock. And then the member meeting in November
The 15th.
You're right, Madam President, November 15th. And that will be via Zoom. So our member meetings are via Zoom, but the Haunted Holidays is going to be a special event. It's going to be in person. Yes, we'll have decorations, and yes, costumes are encouraged. You don't have to, but you're encouraged. It would be nice, but you don't have to, And also the same for what if, you got a costume you want to wear on Zoom for what if, that could get really fun too, or interesting. Or
Ellen, could you tell me the time of that writing meeting?
which one?
The
Brazos Bookstore.
No, the November 15th one.
Oh, it would be the same as our meeting times, so 6 o'clock.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a
And-
regular member meeting time.
Okay, question.
Yes, Jean.
With the Haunted Holidays,
Yes.
how early do you have to sign up to do this?
As
If you
soon as
want to take,
I send you the sign up,
There's a limited number of slots.
Yeah.
Okay. There's for Haunted Holidays, there's 10 slots. I believe I put 12 on. So the signups are in place for both of these on our calendar.
okay.
So if you go to the calendar for the 5th and the 17th, there will be a link to Sign Up Genius to sign up for a time slot. Now, for our meeting, I mean, as always, they really, it's not going to be exact because it depends on, how many announcements we have and so forth. But for the one at Brazos, it's just going to be totally relative. There's going to be 2 organizations. I just put times down there. So if you want to go first, sign up for the first slot. If you want to go last, sign up for the last slot. But don't hold me to those times.
Yeah, and so since we have 2 groups coming together and we're out in public again, those need to stay pretty close to 5 minutes. Like I said, a brief introduction and then 5 minutes of your brilliance through either poetry or essay or haiku or however you choose to write that out.
And don't forget, we're also including Election Day as one of those potential haunted
That's
holidays.
true.
So there's all kinds of options for y'all.
Yes. Some people think Election Day is very scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Any more questions about these 2 events? I think they're going to be a lot of fun. I'm a listener, not a reader, and I always enjoy these reading events.
And we look forward to meeting you face to face in person.
Let me see. The people who are participating in the collaboration have received an email or should have received an email from me a couple days ago about the extension. And that one is a hard extension because my deadline for getting the content has not moved. So now I have less time. So, dot your I's, cross your T's, and check them twice. Do not cross your I's and dot your T's. Because the reception and the venue is in a place that a lot of people aren't familiar with, we are working hard to have bus transportation. So we've got, I think, 1 board member who has volunteered to sign up for the training to be, I don't know, like a bus monitor. Like when we went on class trips as kids, there was a couple of poor unsuspecting moms that volunteered to go on the bus. We need a couple of those to, make sure y'all get on the bus and behave yourself while you're on the bus, back and forth. Shouldn't be too difficult, but we do need 2 people. So we need 1 volunteer, and that would be just great because I think it'll be a lot of fun.
When is it again? What's
December
the date?
3rd, the first Saturday of December, December 3rd.
Okay, I should probably be able to do that.
Yes, ma'am. We're going to be going on a county bus too, so it should be accessible, right? Okay, and as always, if you have any member news, please send it to newsletter@wivla.org so our
I have a question.
newsletter editor, Sabina, can get it into the newsletter. Yes, Gladys May.
Yeah, back to the collaboration, when you submit, because I'm writing, does it have to be, is it 12 font, or is it a 14?
No, please don't worry about that. I'd even be happy if you submitted it in plain text because it's going to be changed in the book.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
it doesn't, I just want to, that's what I want to know. Does it, the font matter? Okay, that's it.
yeah. Because I'm going to be most likely, I'm going to be changing everybody's.
Okay, that's all I need to know. I just need to know that you need to, okay, that's it.
Okay. Okay, any more questions or comments before I turn the meeting over to Margot?
The thing- extension for the collaboration, did you send that out as Melody Law or as WiVLA or as
Oh,
an email?
So you're expecting me to remember something I did yesterday, right?
it was Melanie.
I think it must have been me.
Mhm,
Yeah,
you
I
did.
think so.
Yeah, it was
It's
my
on the
Gmail
Melanie line.
account.
Mhm.
I think I probably don't have it then.
Oh, wow.
Who's, I can't see who's talking. Is that Jean that's talking?
Get Jean.
Okay, Jean,
Yeah.
I will
Same
make a
email I
note.
have for was in July.
You're
So,
really breaking up, Jean. I'll make a note after the meeting.
okay, thanks.
Sure. Okay, Margot, it's all yours. I can't just wait to see what your teaser is.
I don't have a teaser, so, everybody needs fish oil. So there's your teaser. Man, I'm just really slipping. All right, so I did want to make an announcement before the teaser, and that is we still have spots available for the tour of the archive collection at the Menil on Wednesday, October the 19th at 11:15 a.m. So it's on the calendar, and you can sign up on the calendar, and we'll be going to the Bistro Menil for lunch afterwards. Okay, so for next month, Ali Villaness will delight us with a presentation on crankies or cranky boxes. So cranky boxes are an old storytelling art form that involves an illustrated scroll wound onto two spools. And the spools are loaded into a box made with a viewing window, and then it's hand cranked. And the story is told through spoken word, and it's accompanied by music, and it's sometimes enhanced with shadow puppetry. And Ali is an extremely multi-talented person. She plays the ukulele, she writes music, she sings, she writes beautiful stories. I mean, she has got it all, baby. And I guarantee you, you're going to be cranky for the rest of the year if you do not come to this next meeting. Really. All right. So speaking of having great presentations, I'm really happy to introduce choreographer Lori Yuill. She has been engaged in making dances for the past 2 decades. Her most recent work, Still Life, was commissioned by the Pilot Dance Project and performed as part of the Houston Fringe Festival in 2020. She has made a number of site-specific works, including Green Zebras, Moringa Madness, I probably mispronounced that, which was performed at Urban Farm, Finca Tres Robles, and Refraction, which was performed at the Houston Kite Festival as part of the Color Bursting Herman Park. In addition to making dances for specific spaces, Lori has made several evening-length works for the stage, including The Remembering Happens, while doing a residency at Rice University. And her work includes ongoing research into in-between spaces, which we heard about this weekend at our workshop. So that's the space between narrative and abstraction, choreography and improvisation, and between performance and rehearsal. She's going to talk with us about a program I absolutely love, Fieldworks. Kay McStay has participated in Fieldworks also. And I think you're going to really learn some great new skills for giving and receiving feedback. So without further ado, take it away.
Thank you, Margot, and thanks y'all for having me tonight. So as Margot mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about Fieldworks. So I thought I'd give us some background on what it is, who it's for, how it works, and then give us a chance to practice the giving feedback portion of the process. So you'll have to forgive me. It's been a minute since I've done a lot on Zoom. So if I'm a little clunky tonight, my apologies in advance. Let me see if I remember how to do all the sharing screen. Success. All right, so just a little background on what Fieldwork is. So it is a feedback process that was started in 1986 by Steve Gross in New York City. And it was at a time when at least a lot of performing artists were feeling kind of this harshness of criticism that maybe came from the end of a performance without a support group to get you to a final product. So he initiated this process and it kind of expanded to be in multiple cities and existed that way for a while. So there's an organization called The Field that housed Fieldwork within it, but the Field has always done multiple things. So in New York City, it acts as a fiscal sponsor for other organizations. It has given space grants to different artists to use to build work. And today they're expanding a little bit more into their equity and diversity work. So they're focusing more on fiscal sponsorship and other ways of supporting kind of the financial side for different artists. And so now Fieldwork is a little bit under reorganization. It is going to be run by a company called Core Dance, who exists in Atlanta. And they're actually who I connected with to start facilitating Fieldwork in Houston. So they're going to be kind of the hub that other cities network through. So right now in Houston, we don't have anything organized, but hopefully soon. I know there's a multiple facilitators who are here in Houston that are interested in forming groups. So stay tuned on that, Mark. I wanted to go through some of the overall values of Fieldwork. It's part of what's made it so special to me, this emphasis on practice. So part of what's meant by that in these values is that when we enter into this process of giving feedback in Fieldwork, it's viewed as a practice that nobody kind of gets to an expertise in. So we're always entering it with an open mind to learn something new, whether you're a first-time field worker or have done it for many years. There's also this value of openness, so entering into a different works with equal generosity. And this is one thing that I think is hard to get to sometimes. We all get into our little cloisters. I mean, even more and more these days, right? Experience things that we like, talk to the people who like the same things that we like. So Fieldwork holds as a value of being a place where people can bring different voices, different viewpoints, different methods of making work. And as a person giving feedback to these different perspectives, you kind of jump in with a commitment to enter into the artist's world, whether it's one that you like or agree with or not. So it helps kind of spread your mind open and helps when you're getting feedback on your work to know that people are really trying to come along on your ride and enter your artistic practice. In addition, this value of seeing more. So what's meant by that is that when you're observing or witnessing artwork within Fieldwork, you want to stay in this kind of mode of receiving. So it can feel a little weird, well, maybe because I come from the performance art. So usually at the end of a performance, you know, there's clapping and kind of this acknowledgement that there's an end. So we put a little period on that in Fieldwork and don't clap, but stay in a mode of considering what just happened, of contemplating, meaning, gathering thoughts to give feedback. And along with that is putting yourself in suspending judgment. So trying to stay in a place with whatever artwork you've just seen of witnessing. What did you see in it? What did you experience? What were your feelings around it? And to not jump into those realms that were a little more common with of, I loved this, or this really didn't suit me. This wasn't my cup of tea. Then the value of diversity, which I feel like the field organization is diving even deeper into these days. But fieldwork has always been a place where diversity kind of in all the senses, diversity of race, of gender, of religion or non-religion, differentiation in age, differentiation in experience, all of that is kind of encouraged to come into the room. And the value is that that will kind of grow us all as artists, hearing from these different perspectives. So all of that speaks a little bit more to the process of giving feedback, but then there's this other underlying value of authorship, so that the artist is encouraged to come in with kind of ownership and authorship of their work. And I'm going to talk a little bit more when we look at the role of the artist in this process of how that's built within the fieldwork method to kind of support an artist maintaining the authorship of their own work. So I'm going to go a little bit through the who, what, why, how, when, all the nitty gritty. So I spoke to this a little bit. Who's it for? Fieldwork is for artists of all genres. When I started doing fieldwork, it was in New York, and I had a group that I think everybody there was performance-based, but there was theater and dance. I've been in different groups, one in DC that was intentionally multidisciplinary. So we had a writer, a photographer, a visual artist, a dancer, a multimedia designer. And some places they kind of curate the groups. So if there's a group of visual artists specifically who want it for visual artists, there are cities where that exists, or for choreographers. One partnership we've done in Houston is with the artists in residencies through Dance Source Houston. So sometimes it does get into the niche, and other times it's used to bring kind of a variety of artists into the space at once. Like I said, it's for artists of all different careers. So there is also this belief that somebody just starting out trying to kind of find their voice might have a different thing to say than somebody who has been working in the field for years and years and years. And so this idea of letting them be in the same room and taking it from the perspective that it's not for somebody who's necessarily already an expert in their field. You might be, but it's not only for people who got a graduate degree in the particular thing. And maybe most importantly, it's for those in process. So it's a 10-week program usually, and you meet once a week to share work. So you're building towards a final showing of some sort, but you're not coming in with a finished product. And you're probably also not coming in with the very beginning idea, somewhere in the middle where you're trying to really flesh out an idea. And I'll say I'm focusing in on artists because this is WiVLA, but I've also seen this used in kind of business situations where maybe there's people working on a project as a way of giving feedback. I've used it with classes where people were working in groups to form a presentation. We've used it there as a way of figuring out how to give each other feedback. So it's useful beyond the arts. So going a little deeper into the when, again, it's when you're in process. at the point when you're ready for an outside eye, when you're kind of working on something that you're ready to get a little feedback on it. But again, not when you're ready for an audience, not when you're at the final phases. It can be a really useful process to come into when you're developing your artistic voice. So when you're at that point where, I think we think of that term often at the beginning of a phase, but for example, right now in my dance work, I'm kind of questioning like, oh, do I make the same type of work that I did 10 years ago? What is my voice now? So it can be kind of helpful at those various points, those junctures where you're reconsidering what you're making. And it's particularly helpful when you're at a point where you want to take a big risk or try something new. So we know those moments are super scary to get it in front of the public eye. So it's helpful to have these kind of phases before the greater public seeing it to test out some ideas and get some feedback. So these goals I took from the facilitator handbook. I thought they give a really nice kind of synopsis of the whys of this process. So the first goal is to provide artists with a safe place to present the work and receive feedback in terms that are constructive, challenging, and nurturing. So I think when Steve Gross kind of initiated this, it was at a time, at least in the performance art, where several different of these systems were kind of being developed. So I think people were feeling like, oh my gosh, I get to the end and then I get these either harsh or really good reviews, and neither are very helpful, either from a personal standpoint or from kind of outside critic who comes and watches. And I think we probably all experienced that. You have your best friend who comes and sees something and is like, I loved it, it's great. And you're left going, but what do I do with that? I'm glad you liked it, but how do I go forward? And then on the other end, where we get this very negative feedback and you're like, oh, I'm crushed, I never make anything again. So the goal is to set up a situation where it's a safe place to take some risks, to try new ideas, and you get feedback that really helps you to progress in your process. The second goal of re-energizing artists in relationship to their art by having others, go back. So sorry. We've reached my first. There we go. Okay. So re-energizing artists in relationship to their art by having others respond to the work and provide new perspectives. This is one of the things I love most about Fieldwork. I can't actually think of a meeting that I came out of where I didn't leave with a new idea, or this sense of energy of like, okay, I know where to go next in this piece. And I think a lot of it comes from hearing from these outside eyes. Just knowing what people are seeing, what they're experiencing, gives a lot of information and a lot of energy to your process. So we also have this goal of breaking through isolation of working as an independent artist, specifically by joining other artists who are in development. I think for myself, this is something I experienced, especially when I finished school. It's like you're in this little bubble where you're with other people making work and you're talking about it. And then, at least in the dance world, once you enter the kind of professional scope, you kind of lose that. And it's like, how do you find a group of people who are also making things that you can have these kind of process conversations about? So number 4, participating in an ongoing deadline structure to facilitate productivity. I also really love this one about fieldwork. So I find more and more as I get older that I become a procrastinator. I think it's partially having 2 little ones that I'm chasing around. Kind of can't get to things until they have to be done. So having this weekly goal of something to share helps a lot of people and keeps the kind of creative juices flowing. And then finally, developing an artist's ability to articulate clearly what they perceive in others' work. This is something that I find helpful not only in viewing art, but just in communicating about the world around us. So finding language to talk about things that is reflective, that's constructive, that gives you time to express your curiosity and your own perspective based around somebody's work. And I think for me, it's one of the most critical things right now. We're living in this very social media world where, number one, you don't have the chance to slow down and take time with things anymore. We're always scrolling on to the next thing. So this process kind of gives you that chance to slow down and look at something for a minute. And we're also out of the practice, I think, in talking to people about things. We have, this much space to write something. So, we all do the shortcut of thumbs up, thumbs down. So going back into that part of our brains where we spend a little time fuzzy with our language to really figure out what we want to articulate. The person who kind of trained me in fieldwork in Houston to be a facilitator, they say that it's like group therapy, which I always love that perspective that you're going into this room and it's as much about the how of giving feedback as it is about receiving the feedback on your own work, kind of talking through these ideas together. So moving on to the how, the format is fairly simple. You come into the room, we usually split up and decide at the beginning who's going to show work today, what order is it going to be in, and then you show all of the work in one fell swoop. So instead of showing a piece, giving feedback, showing a piece, giving feedback, all of the work is viewed first, and then we group together and give feedback on the work in order. So part of this is, again, to help us slow down. So we see all the work, have a chance to kind of process it first before we give feedback on it. And it is also a way, from a facilitator standpoint, of making sure that each artist gets kind of an even amount of time spent with their work each week. And then there's this third phase in a feedback session called open discussion. And that looks a little bit different based on group. It's a little bit more fluid. Sometimes it's a moment to give feedback on the feedback. How is the process going? What are the things that we can fine tune in the process? Or maybe it's a moment where some particular topic comes up within the meeting that we go a little bit deeper into. And then I didn't put on here, but Neil, one of the other facilitators in Houston, always says, but there's this other part of fieldwork that is the parking lot conversation. And that's true. So some ways I always feel like the part that you do together opens up the discussion so that you can go into the parking lot and have these more free-form conversations about the work. So next I'll go through kind of the role of the facilitator, the role of the artist, and the role of the group within the system. So I think I mentioned the process is a peer process. So even the facilitator is considered a peer artist. They'll come to show work as well. And so we take kind of this, we take away the word teacher. We're not there to kind of teach anything. The facilitator isn't necessarily even an expert in the particular art that they make, although they might be, but they are somebody there to guide the process. Sometimes that looks like a timekeeper of making sure things are moving along. And they're a person who's there to help delve into assumptions and guide conversation. So sometimes it's slowing down and saying, oh, I hear you saying you like this particular thing about the work. Can you go a little deeper into what you mean by that, or what parts of it drew you in? So the facilitator can kind of help the conversation along and help us get out of pitfalls if we get into some language that's not particularly helpful to the artist. The artist So the role is to receive feedback and to do that without giving any disclaimers or explanations about your work, which I guess I should have also said share work is the role. So there is this particular thing in fieldwork where the artist shows work and they don't really talk at all about it. So before you show a piece, it's discouraged to do any sort of explanation about what the work's about, so that you give yourself a chance to put your work in front of an audience with a blank slate, as you would to the general public. So when they come and see it, they may not have a description about the piece. They may not know your background or anything about your process. So as much as possible, we try to replicate that in the fieldwork process. And one way of doing that is to not do any preambles before you show work. And I'll admit, at first, this felt really weird to me. It's like, oh my gosh, I wanted to have a little bit more of a conversation when I'm getting feedback. But there is this nice empowering thing about it, that if you hear feedback, then you don't have to make any explanations or try to defend your work. You can just kind of sit with what it is and hopefully set up with a situation where the feedback being given has been created in this bubble where there's a way of giving it that is something that you can receive. And then the role of the group. So we're going to go, when we look at work tonight and have a chance to talk about it, I'm going to go through a little bit more specifically ways of giving feedback and maybe starter sentences for how to go about that. But the general role is to talk about what you see, to express your gut reactions. So feelings are always really helpful to hear. The initial thing that hit you, what was that? We try as a group to go beyond the likes and dislikes, which is not to say you can never say I liked or I disliked this in fieldwork. It's just to go a little deeper. I liked such and such because it made me feel a particular way, or it connected to this particular part of my life that really resonated. And then finally, to provide feedback that embraces the artist's viewpoint. So we encourage ourselves when watching somebody else's work or looking at somebody else's work or listening to somebody else's work to really jump into their world, so that the feedback that you give comes from the perspective of that world, that universe, which may not be the universe from which you make artwork from, but to really accept the world that you're in, and the idea that giving feedback from there will be the most useful for that artist in taking their work forward. Okay, so I'm talking a lot. I wanted to pause just there for a second to see if there's any questions or comments or curiosities before we go a little bit deeper into how to give feedback and look at a few work samples. Zoom is so weird.
Keep in mind, y'all are on mute. In case
Yes.
you want to talk.
And I think I'm set up, I don't know, can I put us back to where we're in gallery? Oh, there are, now I can see all your lovely faces. Okay. And if not, that's okay. We can go a little deeper and maybe questions will come up after we practice or do. But I know I'm a fast talker, so sometimes I like to slow down and say, are there any questions?
So I had, one thing struck me. So you have a timekeeper. Does that mean that every critique is time boxed? So everyone has, say, 10 minutes or what have you?
So yes, we, sorry, I'm hedging because so that for the actual feedback portion where we're now giving feedback on each person's piece, yeah, it is pretty common to actually split it up. Okay, there were 3 people who showed work today. Look at the clock, do some quick calculations. Okay, we've got 30 minutes left, so that means we have 10 minutes per. And depending on the group, I've even gotten super specific. Okay, we've got 10 minutes per piece. There's 10 of us. So we're going to put on a timer and you have 1 minute to give your best feedback to them, which happens later and later in especially with performative work where you're spending more time as the pieces grow longer. So you're spending more time at the beginning showing work, and you have less and less time for feedback within the session. So yeah, we do get pretty specific. In the viewing part, one thing I've done when we have sort of a combination of visual work and performative work is to say, okay, we want to make sure that we spend some time with these visual art pieces. So I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes, and we're going to look at this piece of artwork for 5 minutes to kind of even out that time frame as well.
So, I'm sorry, Margot, I know you have your hand up, but so you said, if I'm remembering correctly, so say I'm a visual artist, and so I would have 5 pieces, and all 5 pieces would be looked at like at pretty much the same time, if I'm remembering correctly, and then each one would be critiqued in the order that they were put up. Is that what I understood you to say? And so if I had a total of 10 minutes, then it's divided by 2 minutes, or now I forgot how many pieces I put up. But anyway, is that how it would work then? Then each piece would get 2 minutes if there were 5 of them, 10 minutes?
That's a good question. So I would say when I have worked with visual artists, at the beginning of the phase, it's typically like one painting that's in process.
Okay.
I think I'm thinking back to Karen. I think she finished with 3 pieces that she brought in. And in that case, I think it was a little bit more of a conversation, like, is there a particular piece you want more feedback on?
Okay.
I think what she said that time, if I'm remembering correctly, is that this was a body of work. So she wanted us to look at it
Right.
as a body of work and discuss it in that way.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so that's a good question. There is a little give and take in there. I think performance art too, like if you show something near the end, it's 12 minutes, but you have a little sticky point that you really want feedback on. As an artist, at that point, you can say, like, could you focus your feedback on the first 5-minute section?
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Margot has her hand up.
Yes,
Okay.
Margo.
Okay, so I have a question about where it provide feedback that embraces the artist's view. So how do we find out what the artist's view is? Do we ask the artist, or should it be sort of obvious from their work what their view is?
That's a good point, because I said the artist can't talk, right? So yes, I think in that, let's see, how do I say this? You're still going to be making up what you think the artist's viewpoint is. But I guess, for example, if we're listening to a short story and it is a science fiction piece of writing, this is probably my easiest example, right? Because I'm saying science fiction. So we know we have to go into that science fiction world, but maybe that's a good way of thinking about each piece that you're entering. So if you're entering a piece of classical music, hearing a piece of classical music, that you're entering the world of classical music to respond. Doesn't mean you necessarily have to know anything about that world, but that you're accepting that this work exists in that world. And you're not going to try to critique, or I shouldn't even say the word critique, give feedback on a piece of classical music based on your love of rock.
Yeah, it's like, I don't like classical music, so I just don't like it.
Right. And it can be helpful too, because sometimes as a viewer, you do see things that you're like, this is just not my cup of tea, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that this isn't my cup of tea, because I'm going to try to help this artist move their work forward. So I'm going to enter that cup of tea and try to give feedback based on what I know around that. Does that answer your question, Margo? Yeah. Okay. I see Gail has her hand up.
Yes, hi. You mentioned that you, in a group, you select the pieces that will be shown that meeting. Could you talk a little about the expectations if someone joined a group? How many people are there, and how much time would be spent? How many times would their piece be the one on view?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like I said, it's usually a 10-week session when it's done. And so you do sign up for the full 10 weeks. You kind of buy in that you're going to be there and be present for the full 10 weeks. And then this is a little fluid. So I've been part of groups where there were so many artists involved that we decided ahead of time, okay, we're going to show every other week, or here's the list of weeks, sign up ahead of time for what weeks you're going to show. But we're going to find a balance to where everybody has that number. I've also been a part of groups where there's a little bit of selection each week. Like I have something to show this week. I don't have something to show this week. So you can come in a little bit more loosely. And I think I've been a part of a lot of groups where people showed every single week. So that was very clear of we're going to designate the time. And I think the more fluid ones are more typical that people, they just don't want to show anything that week. So it feels a little bit more like, okay, you've taken yourself out, so we're not glossing over you. But there is the commitment to still show up for the group to give feedback so that we're building that community.
Is there a maximum number of people set to be in a group? I mean, for a group to have in?
Yes, I can't remember what that number is though. I want to say it's around 10 to 12.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anything else? Okay. So let me share again. So what I'm going to do next is go through, there's usually a one-page handout that I'll give at the beginning of a session to everybody that gives the process in a nutshell and some guidance on how to give feedback in this particular way. Because I know when you start, it's sort of like everybody gets a little nervous, like, oh no, I said I liked, or I didn't like that, but I don't know how to comment on it in a way that's constructive. So there's some ways of viewing that give a little bit more insight how to get into that language kind of quickly. So we'll go through that, and then we'll look at time. I have either 3 or 4 pieces to share tonight. So the little bit of the odd thing is that usually you all would be sharing work as well. So that part of it tonight is a little bit false, but Margot got some anonymous paintings for us to use. And I brought a little piece that I'm working on to use as well, so that we get the practice of the feedback part. So let me share here again. Okay, so this is from that one page. Again, I just copied and pasted this. So we'll go through it a little bit more intensely. So these are the tips for giving feedback. The goal being to give honest, generous, specific feedback about your experience of each piece. And the core of this is to reflect back to the artist what you see. So really and truly, you can simply start from, I saw blank. It can seem like really simple feedback to give, but remembering that the artist is so involved in this thing that they're creating, often that very straightforward, I saw this, is very helpful. I don't know how many times I've walked away thinking, oh, I didn't realize that I was doing this dance on a diagonal. Do I want to keep it on a diagonal? I don't know. That had some sort of meaning for this person. So sometimes the really basic things, or I remember one time a facilitator said to a piece that I had presented, you started by walking over and turning on the music, and then you entered the space with kind of a rush of energy. And I thought, oh, I was just turning on the music. That wasn't part of it, but I think I want it to be, because that's kind of interesting. So it can give ideas too. So some simple things to just kind of think about are what struck you. What are the moments that are kind of in your eye? If it's a performance piece, that are kind of these little snapshots that stick with you, or if it's a visual art piece, what part of the texture, the color, the area of the painting or the sculpture draws you in? What surprised you about it? And this is a nice little trick around both the I liked and I didn't like statements. So sometimes I was surprised by the energy that was in the fast part of the music, because it came out of this really slow melodic. And so then the artist doesn't know, like, did you like the fast part or not? But they know it was a surprise. So you can kind of frame it that way, that this thing stuck out, and then the artist can choose, like, oh, I really didn't want it to be a surprise that this fast music came in. Let me bridge that gap. Some other things to think about are what distanced you or what confused you. So again, these are kind of on the, like, maybe I disliked it. But again, accepting that maybe the artist wanted you to be distanced. So if you just simply give the feedback of the darkness of the lighting really pushed me away, I felt outside of the space, then the artist can kind of decide, well, that's great. I wanted you to feel like an outsider at that moment. So something that kind of maybe rubbed you the wrong way is the intention. But it puts it into language that the artist can hear and make some choices about it. Things that are confuse you, you can just bring up questions. Like, I was wondering why there was such a cliffhanger at the end of this, this piece of writing. It left me really confused about the overall story. Some other things are the structure. So talking about the structure can be really helpful. I saw that this movement was made up of 3 different sections, a very contemplative section, followed by a section that had more narrative, and then ended with a section that seemed to be all about color and shape. So yeah, breaking things down into just what structures you saw can be helpful. Bringing in any social, cultural, political, or historical context is helpful. So this piece made me think about such and such. This piece made me think about the civil rights movement and how it's related to today's cultural situation. This piece made me think about war and the different wars that we've been through in the country. So anything that relates to the world around us can be helpful to hear. And of course, your emotional response, which for me is always the easiest to go to. This made me feel really joyful. This made me feel really anxious. Maybe that's just where I tend to read and where I tend to live. So that tip is always very helpful for me. And then your understanding of the work's intent. So this one can be a little fuzzy, because we do want to try to stay away in fieldwork from giving suggestions to people. So I know for myself, sometimes I can get a little fuzzy in my head of, like, this was a piece about happiness. And so I wished at the end you had ended on a high note. So those sorts of things I have to, like, keep it to the beginning part. Like, this piece really felt like it was about happiness to me. This piece felt like it was about a journey into the forest, and I was surrounded by these different textures and smells. So anything about meaning, emotion, connection to the world around us, structure, anything that hits home and stands out as a moment that you remember are helpful things in giving feedback. So with all of that, examples are helpful. So going into specifically what it was that made you feel this, specifically what part of the piece made you understand the intent. And nothing is too obvious. So stating the obvious, like I said, can be really helpful for an artist who's, like, wrapped in their mind and not sure of what they're making right now. And then this last little statement, fieldwork also helps participants expand their abilities to view and consider all types of work. So that's one reason I'm spending so long on this slide, is that by getting into this practice of talking about other people's work, you expand your understanding of art, understanding of the world. I've had times when 10 weeks is a long time to spend with people. So something that I started off not really liking It's like, oh, but now by week 10, I've really entered this world and I understand it, and I'm committed to this artist getting what they want out of this. So it's opened up my mind within the process too. Okay, I won't spend as much time on this slide because, like I said, tonight we're not so much in the role of receiving feedback. But helpful just to know that the goal is to receive information about how your work is coming across to different viewers. So going back to that idea of getting a chance to put it in front of people before you put it in front of the greater public, but also putting in front of people in the same way. So they're coming to it as a blank slate, giving you kind of, the hope is more objective feedback to help you progress your work. So like I said, we try to show work without any preambles or explanations. So you really don't say anything except something that might go in a program. So a work's title, perhaps listing what music is if you're showing something that has music to the performance. I'm trying to think of if there's anything else. I mean, really specific like that is okay, but mostly you just don't say anything. You show the work and then get the feedback. So similarly, when we're in the process of getting the feedback, the idea is to maintain your autonomy. So one thing we ask artists to do is to not comment at all as you're getting feedback. And really the intention is to keep you from that kind of knee-jerk reaction we all have of defending your work. So just to accept that this is what you've put out there, this is where it is right now. You can take feedback that's helpful and you can erase any of the feedback that wasn't. So it gives you the opportunity to say, okay, these are the choices I'm going to make for next time. In doing it, I feel like it is a rush of information. So I often ask artists, like, you probably just want to take notes while you're getting feedback. And so that also kind of helps you stay away from feeling defensive or kind of too touched at a nerve in those tense moments. To be able to just to put it on paper, and then literally you can erase something that just isn't what you're trying to do, doesn't relate to it right now. Excuse me. So the one place that you can kind of speak up as an artist is if somebody gives feedback that you just don't understand, you can say, I have a clarifying question. Can you speak a little bit more about what you mean by this statement? And as I mentioned before, you can also ask for specific comments, like I'm really questioning the music. Can you give me some feedback about the music? Or here's the costumes. Can you give me some feedback about the costumes? And then we encourage artists to revel in the amount of information you receive and use it to help further your artistic vision. So that's the goal with this whole thing, is take what's helpful, use it to progress to the next. Okay, and this one, again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but just some of the peculiarities about fieldwork is that we don't clap after we see something. So again, that's to just kind of keep you as the viewer in the mindset of taking in, so not to cut that experience short. And to know that your recognition is in the feedback. So you are acknowledging the artist when you're giving feedback. We really try to stay away from giving any suggestions because they take away the authorship, they take away that part of the problem solving, that part of our creative brain that goes like, oh, it's on the tip of my tongue, but I'm not sure yet. So we don't want to stop that part of the artist's process. So we do try to take away anything that's a suggestion. Any statement that starts with, I wish you would have, or have you thought about doing such and such? Those are the ones that you like, wait a second, that's a suggestion. Let me reframe it. It doesn't mean that you can't give it. It just means you have to figure out how to phrase that suggestion as an observation, which can be the fun conundrum of giving feedback. And then we do, like I said, the parking lot conversation afterwards. You know, after a while in fieldwork, you develop these personal relationships, people may be at a point closer to the end where they do want some suggestions. And so it's not to say that it's unimportant to give suggestions or to, brainstorm with people. It's just in this particular time period, we're going to stay away from that to get a little bit deeper into the observations. And then finally, remembering the facilitator is not a teacher, but a peer artist. So to amplify that, the facilitator also shows work and gets feedback within the process. But they're there to kind of hold the space, make sure the environment is safe so that we can be brave as we're showing work and giving feedback. Okay, I think the next slide is going into the different art samples. So I did want to pause one more time before we go there. One, to do a time check to see how much time we have per piece of artwork. And then if you have any questions before we take a look and just practice the process a little.
How many pieces do you have?
I have 4. For the sake of time, I might just do 3 of them.
Be 10 minutes.
Yeah, 10 minutes each.
Okay.
Let's see, do we have 3? So if we spend 3 minutes on viewing each one and then 10 minutes, does that math work out?
Well, that's more. So it was a total of 10 would get us like to the close to 750-ish. We're at 714.
Okay, perfect. So let's look at each piece for 3 minutes, and then we will do about 7 minutes of feedback per piece.
Gotcha.
Thank you for being good at math.
Lori, I just had one clarification.
Yeah.
If I could be wrong, but if I remember correctly, the idea of giving suggestions, is the artist the one who initiates that? I mean, you don't just go up to an artist and say, "Oh, I have a suggestion for you," or is that okay? Or do we wait for the artist to say, I really would like some suggestions in the parking lot?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think there's probably depending on how well you know the person. This is where it just depends on the group a little, is the short answer to that. I think I would initially, facilitating a group, say, let's really hold suggestions. Artists, if there's something you want a suggestion on in the post fieldwork conversation, feel free to share that. I think later on, as you get to know people, it's okay to say, hey, I have a suggestion about such and such. Are you ready to hear that? Do you want any of that information now? So it still gives the artist the permission to say, I'm not really ready for those kind of suggestions, but give me a week and then yes. Yeah. Okay, let me grab my little timer here. So we have 2 visual art pieces, and then I did throw myself into the mix. We have one performance piece, and I'm just going to cut it off at 3 minutes. Okay, so let me go back into share. One thing I forgot to say is, as you're looking, feel free to take notes. With 3 pieces, probably we could remember, but with more, it gets a little challenging, like, oh, what happened 20 minutes ago? I don't remember. So feel free to scribble, take notes, and then use them when we get feedback. Okay, so here's our first piece. I'm going to set a timer now. So we've got about 10 more seconds left with this piece. Okay, so any final thoughts on this one? Write them down. This part, I'll admit, is a little easier to facilitate in person because I can see people, but maybe easier to keep on time in Zoom world because we're going to move on. All right, so that's our 3 minutes on that one. So take any final notes, final thoughts, and then we'll move on to our final image. Oops, if I can figure out how to get out of this. Sorry, hold on 1 second. I want to get the image a little bit bigger. Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay, 3 minutes starting now. We have about 10 more seconds here. All right, so we've got about 20 minutes left. There's a lot of us. So just acknowledge we probably won't all be able to speak to each piece. And maybe as you're speaking for tonight, instead of trying to divvy up like how many minutes each person has to speak, if we'll each pick like our one most urgent thing that we might want to share about a particular piece. And I'll mostly be quiet, but if there's any sort of soft facilitating to kind of guide or pull out, I'll jump in. So the first piece, anybody want to start with feedback for that one? Yes, Kay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Well, I'm Kay, and I have participated in Fieldworks, but it has been many years. And I want to assure the group that I didn't understand the lingo. I was really out of it, but I want to tell you by the time I got to week 4 or to week 5, I was really in love with all my fellow participants. I was learning the language of how to talk about dance and my feelings and what it really opened up. I'm a playwright and a monologuist, and it really opened up how I thought about piece of art. And I also wanted to share very briefly this, well, not the strange, we had a doll maker in one of our groups, and she made these historically, appropriate, but also just evocative dolls. We had a graphic novel writer in another group, and he would show parts of his graphic novel. We had a guitarist and a songwriter and dancers, of course, and other playwrights. And it just expanded my mind to be in any group. So I wanted to talk about, I of course, I was looking at this and I noticed, I felt distressed. And I usually love blue, but I'm not sure I like this blue. I'll say like there. I see some action in the painting and I'm worried about it, but I would say I had a distressful reaction to this painting. And that's all I'll say since I've made my introductory remarks.
Yeah, let me just ask one question. Can you say a little bit about what the action is you see in the painting?
Well, I think I see a hand going up and maybe being there in an offensive gesture. And I don't know, it may not be representational, but I think I see a small child falling. And then the geometric figures at the top have me very intrigued. I don't know what I think about those. But here was the other great thing about Fieldworks is you didn't have just one time to respond. Maybe the artist brought this painting back again and I could be thinking about it for a whole week and then respond, do a fuller response. What I hoped was a fuller or more meaningful response. Not that we're judging it, but I wanted to think about it and come back with a good reaction.
Thanks, Kay. So anybody else want to pop in here? And I have you all just on the side screen, so I can't see hands. So if you want to say
Gabrielle's raised her hand.
unmute. Gabrielle.
I should be unmute. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
On the first one on the painting, I see the distress, I see the shock, I see what falling child or a lost baby. And I am also seeing the blue and the orange, the contrast and the dynamism between those two colors, the kind of shock. And I believe that blue and orange are on opposite color wheel. And then on the dance piece, I wanted to remark on the Mylar.
Wait. I think we're just doing one piece at a time.
Oh, yes. So just say on this one, and then we'll move on and we'll go through each of them consecutively.
Hold that thought.
Yeah. So thank you. So some about the color wheel, the distress, and I didn't mention this before, but in person, it's a little harder here because we can't see each other, but often when we're in person, if somebody says something that you also wrote down, just so that we don't all have to kind of get the sense that it resonated with a bunch of people with just a little snap. So yeah, bring that in here. I don't know how we do it on Zoom, but all right. Anything else on this painting?
June Russell has her hand up.
Okay. Yeah. So, and then Corey after.
And then Lisa, I believe.
And then Lisa. Okay.
I wondered if the artist wanted us to know what was happening or whether this is just geometric and maybe abstract instead of something to interpret.
Can you go a little, say a little bit more about what made that question come to you?
I can see what everybody else has said so far, but the elements are disparate enough that maybe trying to assign a meaning to what's going on is not what the artist wants.
And so can I ask, when you viewed it, did you view it less from a meaning? Did other things, the geometry, did other things like that pop out at you as being the thing that struck you or pulled you in?
Probably the color struck me, and I see that more as purple than blue.
Ah.
And I also was drawn to the texture.
Mm, mhm.
Mhm.
That caught my eye.
Yeah, great. Great. So I'm digging in a little here because one of the beautiful things is that we're not about building consensus. It's we want to hear all the different perspectives, everything that came out. Okay, so I think we have time for two more. Who was it? Corey and
Lisa.
Lisa. And then we'll move on to the next piece and give some other people a chance to respond there.
Okay, the first thing that struck me was I so related this piece to the Scream.
Mhm.
I don't remember the name of the artist, but it is it's
Punch.
yeah, that's right. It's a piece of horror, and this piece is a piece of grief to me. And also the parallel lines, these reminded me of fingers, but
Mhm.
here's parallel lines and here's some lines. It just is a kind of a recurring motif, and the texture is such a strong part of this piece. It gives so much depth to this piece.
Mhm.
Thanks, Corey. So Lisa, and then let's move on to the next.
Sure,
work.
thank you. What struck me about it, it took me probably about 2 minutes into it that I saw the depth of the painting, meaning that it's really, there's a three-dimensional aspect to it. And I just caught another moment of it just a few minutes ago when others were talking, but I see that there's a blue figure between what I first initially perceived to be a child, but there's a blue figure almost like wearing a top hat. And,
Ah,
and then I realized that the hands are interlocking. There's a blue hand interlocking the gold hand.
Mhm.
Then I started wondering if the figure that I thought was a child was perhaps expanding into the painting and was connected to the lines behind it, because there's a real, once I started really looking at it, I could see this three-dimensional aspect to it. And, you know, I just wondered if that could be emphasized a little bit more, because it took me a little bit to see that. But I don't know if that's what he was trying to do or the artist she was trying to do. But it is very evocative. I feel horror more than anything. There's a real sense of horror and dread. And I do agree with some of the other speakers that the colors really emphasize that feeling of tension and emphasize that tension. So, thank you.
Mhm.
Lisa.
Mhm.
So at this point, if we were with the artist, I would say any clarifying questions, anything that didn't make sense. So let's go on to, I'm not going to pull it back up because I'm not going to rewatch it, but the movement piece. So now the curious part where I facilitate myself. So I'll give no preambles, but just ask for any comments, and we'll do about the same amount of time, about 7 minutes.
Okay, I'll start.
All right, Margo, thanks.
Okay, in the beginning, I felt like the silver light metallic piece, it sort of felt like the air for me. And I found the sound, I'm calling it a tail, that the sound the tail made as it moved across the floor had a very pleasant feeling for me. That when the dancer took off the tail, it felt like a liberation that somehow I had thought that the tail was something that was sort of helping her be more expressive, but in fact, she needed liberation from that tail. And as the dancer was moving that piece of again, that metallic piece around, for a moment, I had a vision of some of these Olympic events where women take like ribbons and they twirl the ribbons around. Then I thought, so the metal tail, once it's off, is sort of in this heap on the floor. And the dancer did not seem to me to be moving far away from that metal piece. And I thought, I wonder if that metal tail had some kind of a hold on the dancer. I was curious about the voices. They had like this sort of otherworldly sound to me, and I was kind of wondering what they were saying. And when I heard the beginning of the Wonder Woman song, I thought, oh my God, this is hilarious. It's a wonder, sort of an homage or whatever to Wonder Woman. So I found that part sort of lifted my spirits and made me want to laugh. And I felt delighted by that. And I felt kind of proud of myself that I knew that song.
A lot of us know that song.
Oh, be quiet. All right.
I said us.
Oh, okay.
One thing that Margot just said that I forgot to mention is, because Margot has a lot of experience with this, is talking about the dancer or the character. So that's one thing, giving feedback is helpful as the person talking, giving feedback, to just remember that you're not talking about the performer. And it helps the performer also to be like, oh, right, that's a character, that's not me up there. So it's just a way of like helping language out. I see Gail's hand raised.
June, is your hand still raised for this, or?
No,
Okay, you need
I have to
take it
turn
down.
it off.
Yes,
Sorry.
it's not that smart.
Yeah.
All right, so Gail, go ahead and jump in.
So it's still.
Oh, you're muted, Gail.
There we go. Is that better? The first thing I noticed was the crinkly sound, of course, and all the light around. As she danced, well, the crinkly, no. I've said it all. I just wanted to say I noticed the crinkly sound of the metal. As she danced, I really noticed the pauses where she was just engaging in stillness. That was striking to me. And the words, there were two different instances, one with words and one was more whispery. I couldn't tell what they were saying, but I didn't know if it might have been because it's a recording instead of really being there. But I really wanted to know what they were saying, whatever the reason was. I, like Margot, when the metal thing was removed, and I never attached any meaning to its specific meaning, just that it was acknowledged it was there. I felt the dancer became freed to move, and there was no more of the stillness. She really started moving and dancing. And the first music made me think of a couple dancing tenderly together. And except she was alone. And that led me to the thought that she was inviting us in to join her emotionally, physically, just to join with her. And then the second music made me feel like she was getting impatient for someone to come in there and join her.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm doing the artist thing of taking a million notes. All right, and we have maybe one more, time for one more, or if there's not, we can move on to the next one. Gabrielle?
Yeah, I just wanted that one of the things that really charmed me about the use of the Mylar and the way that the choreography worked is that the dancer was dancing both because of, and then later as the dance progressed, in spite of the Mylar. If that makes sense. There was some, the Mylar, I think, inspired the movement, and then the dancer was also able to move in spite of it. So that was a real interesting dynamic.
Jessica?
Well, just one brief comment. After the Mylar was off, that was a really good comment before. I like that. I noticed that the dancer did some special little small steps. And so that got me intrigued. I'm thinking, did taking the tail or the part of the gown off, or whatever we want to call it, did that inspire her to do other dance steps in a very small pattern? And was she repeating like a folk dance? You know, I wondered what were those little steps she was doing. That's all. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, for the sake of time, I'm going to move us on to the last one. See if I can very quickly pull it back up. There we go. Yes, Kay.
I just wondered, does this piece have a title? And can we know it? And can we know it?
Since I'm not the artist, I won't share because I don't know if they would want it to or not.
All right. That's
and the artist is not here present. So let's see.
We have two raised hands.
Yeah, June and Shirley.
Yes.
Did you, Shirley?
So go ahead, Shirley. You go first and then June.
Okay. My first reaction to this piece was Georgia O'Keeffe. It hit me as something that had that look or has that look. And then I began to pay attention to the negative spaces, which I consider the black parts. And then the other, that enabled the other things to come forward because of me deeming the black negative spaces. It seems like there's a loud conversation going on the right half with more bold colors, and a quieter conversation on the left half. So I kept looking for some of the dark blue to show up somewhere on the left half. And yet perhaps the artist wants the eye to be drawn to that blue. So those are my reactions. It's a piece that brought a lot of questions for me.
Thanks. June?
Yeah, when I looked at it, it just immediately came to me as a flower, and specifically an iris based on the yellow and the blue purple in the right front. And then as I looked more, I could almost see figures in the thing, including a figure in the upper right wearing a red hat facing away from us. But just curious.
Yeah, this one for me was so trippy. I kept seeing it as a human form, clothes on a human form, but I can't figure out perspective, like which way is up, or if it's some sort of magical creature that doesn't have a human form. So it really hit my eye like, whoa. Margot, I see your hands up.
Yeah, when you first put that image on the screen, I just thought, whoa. I was so drawn to the left side of the painting. I really had a hard time trying to move my eyes over to the right-hand side, even though the colors are more vibrant over there. There's something about that left side. And it, to me, it almost looks like there are two eggs over there. And those colors, the yellow and the gold and the oranges, are just thrilling to me. And I'm wondering if those eggs are symbolic of something wonderful that's about to be born, you know, over there. And the black background almost, to me, almost makes the painting feel like it's 3D.
Mm.
That's it.
Thanks. Well, I see that it is 7:50. So I want to be respectful of y'all's time. Yeah, any final thoughts or questions on the process as a whole? This was like super fun to be with y'all tonight. I haven't been in Fieldwork for a minute, so it's fun to be back in that experience.
This was wonderful, Lori. I mean, it was interesting to go back, and yeah, I hope that Fieldworks comes back to Houston. It's just a wonderful, wonderful program. And thank you so much for presenting it to us. It's wonderful.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yes, I agree. It's just a great way of working in a critique. I appreciate the tips and suggestions, because many of us are in critique groups already. And I think this will just enhance the experience for the person on the receiving end as well as the giving side. So I appreciate this.
It's making me miss field work. I haven't been there in years. Maybe I need to go back. I'm in the doldrums. I'm in the post-pandemic doldrums. Maybe I need to go back.
Kay, do you need something to do, dear?
Oh.
Yeah, don't anybody tell me that they need something to do, because I'll have a list.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Lori.
I hear you, Melody.
So at this time, does anybody have any announcements? Remember, 1 minute max of things that are going on, readings, exhibitions.
I do. I'm in the Fringe Festival on Sunday night. Thank you, Lori. Sunday night, November the 6th. It is not family friendly. Do not bring your children, or they will hear bad words. And so it's not clean, but it's me. So I hope you'll come.
And you said November the 6th?
November, yeah, it's Sunday, November the 6th.
Okay.
But it'll be fun. It's called Anything Goes. So I think they're like 10 performers, 10 minutes max. And so, you know, it's always an interesting night.
Where is it?
Oh, it's at the Match.
Okay. Is Fringe Festival a multiple times a year thing? Because you just were in Fringe, right?
Yes. This is the main Fringe, but during sometimes during the year, they'll do a thing called the Best of Fringe, and it's not really the Best of Fringe. It's just they should say mini Fringe or something.
If I may jump in, the history of Fringe in Houston is varied and multitudes, and you just don't try to keep up with it. Just go and see good performances.
It's fun.
Okay, anyone else?
Can I do a little plug?
Yes, please.
So I'm going to be showing the work from the video on October 11th. That's a Tuesday night at the Match at, I think it's at 7:30 p.m. It's part of Mind the Gap through Dance Source Houston. And I can't wait to work from your feedback. Thank you.
We will have a video. Usually I get it out within a couple of days, but I'm leaving town tomorrow morning. So it'll be a week or so before the video is out. And so if, in case you didn't take great notes, you'll be able to see it again.
Thanks.
As a reminder, Donna Perkins and I are part of the Pixels and Silver exhibition that is at St. Andrew's Episcopal Church in the Heights. The 3-foot by 5-foot panels are on the fence that go around the church.
Huh.
And that exhibition will be up at least through December 10th, probably longer. I think it's up until the curator gets bored with it, is what he said.
What's the name of the church again?
St. Andrew's Episcopal Church. I believe the address is 1819 Heights Boulevard. So it's on the corner of Yale, 19th and Heights.
Okay.
Church sits at the end of the street there. So it's outdoors, so you can walk around it. You can bring your dog, and then there's a little coffee shop across the street. You can go over and have a great cup of $4 coffee. Cookie. Anyone else? Well, once again, Lori, thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation. I have application almost immediately. And you will be an honorary member of WiVLA for the next year. And that means that you can also post on our calendar of events that you're going to be in. And Margot, don't forget, you can do that as well. And participate in any of the workshops and whatnot that we've got on for the year. And we also have a closed Facebook group. So we hope to see more of you in person and online.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was really fun.
And with that, bring this evening to a close. Thank you very much, ladies. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Night.